fascinating thing with this story of Sam Alito. This guy has paper thin skin and is very nervous. You remember that John Roberts came out with an announcement. What was this, like 2 weeks ago, where he was like, we're going to double down on ethics efforts. And ProPublica came out with a story last night. What was it, last night, or was it?
Last night.
Did it drop it last night?
The
Yeah,
ProPublica story, yeah.
And written by Justin Elliott, Joshua Kaplan, and Alex Mierczewski. And it tells the story of Sam Alito back in July of 2008, who took a fishing trip to Alaska. You can see there's pictures of, and those are big salmon. Whoa, yeah, those are big
good
salmon.
haul there.
Good salmon in Alaska.
And I mean, we can argue about Pacific salmon versus Atlantic salmon. Atlantic salmon have a little more fat content, and so they're a little bit tastier. Pacific salmon, maybe some of those, it doesn't matter. Nevertheless, taking a fishing trip to Alaska, that's fun. It's really fun when you don't have to fly commercial, because a billionaire flies you on his jet worth $100,000 if you had to charter that jet yourself. He was sent there by Paul Singer, a hedge fund billionaire who has had multiple, since 2008, multiple cases in front of the Supreme Court. And I will tell you Alito's response, and we know it, not because he responded to the reporter's request for a comment. In fact, when the reporters reached out for comments for their piece, the Supreme Court said, he's not going to answer this at all. But we still know what his response is, because if you have a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, you can check it out. I think it's behind a paywall. So, which is appropriate, all things considered. But Alito had a response. But before we get to his response, and to be clear, one of the things that you should understand about this is why someone would put their response out at the same time. Just the fact that I had to interrupt my retelling of the story is part of the reason why that's done. But we'll get to that. Alito did not report the 2008 fishing trip on his annual financial disclosures. By failing to disclose the private jet flight Singer provided, Alito appears to have violated federal law that requires justices to disclose most gifts. This is according to ethics law experts. Whatever that means. Charles Gith, an Indiana University law professor, one of those coastal elites, and a leading expert on recusal, says, if you were good friends, what are you doing ruling on his case? And if you weren't good friends, what are you doing accepting this? He said, referring to the flight of on the private jet. Apparently, another wealthy businessman provided expensive vacations to two members of the high court, ProPublica found. On his Alaska trip, Alito stayed at a commercial fishing lodge owned by this businessman, who was also a major conservative donor. 3 years before, the same businessman flew Antonin Scalia, who died in 2016, on a private jet to Alaska and paid the bill for his stay. I mean, so there is a long, robust tradition of Republican appointed judges and conservative judges accepting these type of gifts from wealthy business. But we already know Clarence Thomas and his whole Harlan Crow bromance. I wonder if they each get their own, like when they get sworn in, they go back to the Supreme Court, like, like green room or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And there, in some type of blood oath, they get their own billionaire, like sort of like a mentor or an advisor type of situation that you might get at like a new school or something like that. I know that Saul is like a reading buddy for a kid in kindergarten when he gets into 5th grade. I don't know if it's the same type of thing where you get your own billionaire. and they'll take you on their own trips and that type of thing. Leonard Leo, the longtime leader of the Conservative Federalist Society, attended and helped organize the Alaska fishing vacation. Gosh, what a coincidence. All these guys involved in law. Singer and the lodge owner were both major donors to Leo's political groups. What a coincidence. They just all seem to be interested in the same stuff. Must be fun sitting around the dinner table there.
Being impartial.
Totally. Apparently, according to the, and they did extensive reporting here, they talked to people who worked there. They looked at fishing licenses. They looked at emails. And I wonder how they got those emails. That would be curious. I'd be curious to find that out. Another guest told ProPublica the trip was a gift from Arkley. That is the owner of a mortgage company that also owned this fishing thing. A planning document prepared by Lodge describes Alito as a guest of Arkley. Two Lodge employees said they were told Alito was not paying. In the last decade, Singer has contributed over $80 million to Republican political groups, millions to the Manhattan Institute. This institute regularly files friend of the court briefs with the Supreme Court. At least 15 this term. And we should say, Singer is the chairman of the Manhattan Institute. So it's not just like he's like, he's literally on the masthead. He has a fund that manages $15 billion in assets. These are just some of the highlights. Singer's fund asked the Supreme Court to intervene multiple times on a court case involving Argentina that ultimately paid off by $2.6 billion. Just so many coincidences here. This was a commercial property rather than a vacation home, and therefore it is the typical interpretation of the ethics law requires disclosure if you're staying at a lodge. There is a personal hospitality exemption if you go to someone's private home, but this was a commercial lodge, although it was owned by somebody. So, like everything is, he did not disclose that in his financial disclosure form. Again, he did not recuse himself in any of these cases. And he, instead of answering the questions that ProPublica posed to him, like I say, he somehow had the wherewithal all by himself to prepare to write up an essay for the Wall Street Journal, have it placed there, and refute all these charges on the day that the ProPublica article came out. And the reason why you do this is so that you don't theoretically have a 2-day news cycle. The ProPublica piece would be a news cycle until tomorrow, and then if he responded to it, then it would extend it for another day, and this way he gets it all wrapped up. The recusal is hilarious. He says, my recollection is I have spoken to Mr. Singer on no more than a handful of occasions.
Including on our
all of
our
which
fishing trip.
Well, he didn't go on the, I don't know if Singer went on the fishing trip. Singer just had his plane go there.
Okay, right.
With the exception of small talk during a fishing trip 15 years ago. Maybe he was on the fishing trip.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, Singer is, I think, the guy in the photo. One of the guys holding.
So he
the
was
sample.
on the fishing trip.
I've only talked to him a few times. Like the one time I'm like, hey, grab the net. I got a big one on the line.
We got a big one.
Or at dinner every night in the lodge. It consisted of brief and casual comments at events attended by large groups. On no occasion have we discussed the activities of his business. We've never talked about any case or issue before the court. On 2 occasions, he introduced me before I gave a speech, as have dozens of other people. I don't know if those dozens of other people have also provided him $100,000 worth of plane trips. And as I will discuss, he allowed me to occupy what would have otherwise been an unoccupied seat on a private flight to Alaska. It's funny. You know, if I hadn't taken this bribe, the money would have been spent somewhere else.
That's not good.
You didn't make the money up for me.
Can you just go to the airport and be like, hey, you got open seats, right? I can just
I just hop on that.
On there.
There's no value to that. During my time on the court, I have voted on approximately 100,000 certiorari petitions. The vast majority receive little attention from justices because even a cursory examination reveals they do not meet our requirements for review. Apparently, Singer had a couple of those things in the past. I mean, nice to know that they spend that much time on reviewing some of these court cases. I guess a lot of that time has to be filled up writing op-eds for Wall Street Journal, defending yourself from taking all of these services in kinds. As for the flight, Mr. Singer and others had already made arrangements to fly to Alaska when I was invited shortly before the event. And I was asked whether I would like to fly there in that seat. Like,
and you should.
No, I'm gonna fly commercial because I'm a judge and I can't accept $100,000 worth of private plane.
Wouldn't most judges wouldn't that be their thought process? Like, oh yeah, I'll have to pay you for that. I can't accept that otherwise it is very illegal. Not like, oh, this is last minute. Let's go get some fish.
Or if you were convinced there was nothing wrong with it, you just disclose it.
Right.
I stayed for 3 nights in a modest one-room unit at the King Solomon Salmon Lodge, which was comfortable but rustic facility.
Okay, well,
as long as it's rustic, it's okay.
You know, it's not like the apparently the Ritz-Carlton that they have by the river in Alaska. As I recall, the meals were home-style fare.
Oh my God.
As opposed to like what?
Sushi.
And if there was wine, it certainly was not wine that cost $1,000. He didn't pay for any of it, so he doesn't know what
how
was
would
served.
you know? There's zero chance that was cheap wine. Yeah, it was barefoot Moscato.
I'm not paying for any of this, but I'd like a breakdown of the bill just to, satiate, so I can tell a story. Yep, that's what I thought. Not $1,000 bottle of wine. Sheldon Whitehouse put up this thread by Sheldon Whitehouse. Had some great questions to ask and does so in a way. First, who orchestrated this weird pre-buttal with the infamous Wall Street Journal polluter page? And did Alito get help from a PR firm? If so, who paid? Which is a decent question to ask. Second, and this is the thing. Alito felt he didn't have to report the plane trip because he considers a plane a facility. And supposedly when it comes to personal hospitality, you don't have to pay for use of a facility. And Whitehouse says, seriously, who in real life calls a plane a facility? Maybe the airport, maybe the hangar, but the plane? Been flying all my life and never once heard that term used.
But the facility is going through some turbulence right now.
Exactly. And why dwell on the term facility, Whitehouse asks, but not mention that the personal hospitality, quote, reporting exemption is specifically limited only to food, lodging, and entertainment. And who goes on a fishing trip for accommodations? Because the whole argument is like you have a personal exemption for accommodations. But that's not what's going on there. They got guides. They got presumably like little boats to take you there. They got maybe gear. Who knows?
Outfitters entirely.
Who goes on a fishing trip for accommodations? Don't people go on fishing trips for the fishing? Isn't that the real gift value at issue here? Did Alito really jet to Alaska to spend time in the lodge? Did he fish in the tub? Third, why not ask the Financial Disclosure Committee of the Judicial Conference, the body set up exactly for that purpose, for its advice on what should be disclosed? That's why it's there. And what? He just happened to be flying to Alaska and there just happened to be a private jet going to Alaska with an empty seat and he just happened to find that out, like on some weird billionaire share ride Uber. Oh, and that empty seat trick would that fly with legislative or executive ethics disclosures? The answer is no. And how about with the Financial Disclosure Committee? Right, you didn't ask. This just keeps getting worse. And there it is. I mean, it's just one more example of how sort of like corrupt it is. And, you know, for people who say stuff like, why do we care about any type of diversity? Ask yourself if KBJ is getting invited on any fishing trips with some billionaire hedge fund people.
The Manhattan Institute has already like greased the skids with cash.
It really is amazing how sort of corrupted that process is and how above it they all are, and how Alito, if he felt he had done nothing wrong, why is he running to the Wall Street Journal op-ed pages? Why not just let legal scholars who are involved in ethics find that the ProPublica piece was wrong? And the reason why he won't do that is because ethics experts were all quoted throughout the ProPublica piece. Really unbelievable.